What's up, guys? You are watching Fight Feed, and today's video is going to be a bit of a different video that I've done in the past. So if you guys enjoy this type of video, I would love to hear in the comments if you'd like me to make more of these. Today's video, though, is going to be taking a look at the salaries, or I guess reported on salaries of the fighters from the UFC 319 card. And the reason I wanted to make this video, there's several reasons that I'll get to, but first, a message from the sponsor. If you aren't subscribed to Fight Feed, fuck you! All right, so diving in to the reasons for this video, guys. If you don't know me personally, which a lot of you haven't met me personally, but I've always been someone that's had a knack or been interested in finances and in numbers and all that fun stuff. So that's one element. Now, another element is I have a very hard time understanding some of the payouts and those who are getting a certain amount, and we're going to dive into it. But I wanted to make a video about it because I understand, guys, that a lot of these reported on salaries are bullshit, first of all. Obviously, I don't have the luxury of being in contact with all the people on this list, and I also find it kind of rude when people are like asking fighters what they make because, you know, I don't know. The way I grew up, you weren't ever supposed to ask that. I do think that the whole like don't ask people what they make, it was a whole thing created by corporations so that people could just be paid less money. Take it for what you will. Regardless, wanted to make this video because although I know it is very likely this image I'm showing you guys, which actually, believe it or not, the top result when you do a Google search for UFC 319 payouts is a blog post from BetMGM. So this image is very likely inaccurate. I don't have the exact numbers, nor do I have the ability to really verify. So I want to put that out there before you guys all torch me and say like, oh, this isn't even right. Like, I understand it's very likely incorrect. And I'm hopeful that it's incorrect because the first thing that's pissed me off very much today was seeing that Aaron Pico, according to this, was paid $715,000 for his debut in the UFC. That, guys, right there is appalling to me. Now, I think Aaron Pico, never met the guy. He seems, from all accounts and things I've seen him in, seems actually like a very nice, respectable guy. I feel like someone that would, you know, be easy to hit it off with. He just seems like a good dude, right? So I'm not shitting on Aaron Pico whatsoever in the fact of, I don't want to sit here and say he's not deserving of it. He did get KO'd horribly. But I want to come out and say, it is extremely unfair, in my opinion, when you are paying him that amount of money to debut in the UFC and have no real MMA accolades on his record. I mean, he's not even been a champ in another organization. And I get the wrestling pedigree that everybody and their brother's been talking about. But the fact, if this is an accurate representation of what he was paid, it makes me as a fan upset because I have seen so many other fighters, especially fighters on this list alone, that have done heaps and bounds more than Aaron Pico has in the sport of MMA, who are making $300,000 less, almost $300,000. I mean, more than that. So like the main point of contention, or I guess the main point I can make here is, you know, Jared Cannonier made $371,000 according to this, right? And I think that this is absolutely inaccurate because Gerald Mearshart did not make $371,000. There's no way. But even if you were to take Jared Cannonier making $371,000 and Mearshart making $371,000, the two of them have done so much more, not only in MMA, but for the UFC than Aaron Pico has. And he is getting paid, according to this, $715,000. That is nuts to me. Because, like, as we all know, or most of us know, as fans of the UFC, there's like the whole show win bonus, and we know like there's like standard contracts. Like Alex Pereira, for instance, I believe his initial contract with UFC was $50K to show, $50K to win, so you would get $100K, which even that's almost appalling, right? Because given what Alex Pereira at least did accolade wise in other sports, knowing that when he came into the UFC, he had 2 wins over Israel Adesanya, one of those being a knockout. You beg the question of like, damn, you're probably worth more than $100K, you know? But I think Alex Pereira, he's like a G. He's like, I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna end up being champ anyways. So just pay me this for now, and we'll figure it out. But if this is accurate, guys, it is absolutely appalling that Aaron Pico would be paid that handsomely with no true accolades in MMA. You know, he has some fun KOs, but it's like, when I mean accolades, I mean like he doesn't have a championship belt. He doesn't really have like super high level wins. Like I don't even, you know, Henry Corrales, who had KO'd him previously, that he got that one back. Like I don't know if he's ever even fought in the UFC. I don't think any of these guys have even fought in the UFC. And it's not even like a Patchy Mix situation, where at least Patchy Mix, like you could play the game of like, oh, Sergio Pettis, and like, you know, he has high level wins like over guys obviously that are probably no longer in their UFC prime, but were in the UFC. Like he at least has some of that. But to see this really irked me, guys. Like that is just, I can't even believe that even though he's in a co-main event spot, and I understand that co-main event spots generally create more income for those fighters, and rightfully so. But to have that jarring of a difference between, you know, the co-main event and fighters on this list who have had numerous UFC fights. I mean, Gerald Meerschaert has like probably 30 plus UFC fights. Jared Cannonier's probably right there as well. Like, and they're getting paid, you know, 300,000 plus less than Aaron Pico, who's never had a UFC fight, who's gotten probably one of the biggest promotional pushes from the UFC out of any debutante, as people say, that I've seen in recent years. I mean, even more so, like Michael Chandler got the whole rolled out red carpet treatment too, but not even close to what Pico has gotten. You know, I have seen just nonstop glaze for Pico, and I guys, Pico did great in this fight for the moments he was conscious. Like he did land a body shot that seemed to hurt Lerone Murphy off the rip. And I really haven't seen Lerone Murphy hurt like that in almost any of his fights. So that in and of itself is a W and a feather in the cap of Aaron Pico. But the fact that he got all of that push, all of his promo, and then on top of that, to think that he might, and I say might because, guys, we don't know how accurate this shit is, but to even think that this is a reported on amount that he may have gotten paid, it is just absolutely crazy to me to think that someone can come in from another organization with no true accolades behind their MMA career, you know, other than having some flashy KOs, but like no real big names. If you really want to break it down like that, like there's just no big names on the record of Aaron Pico to where you're like, you're deserving of this co-main event spot where you're going to make $300K more than Jared Cannonier, a guy who's fought for the middleweight belt previously, has a knockout in 3 different weight classes in the UFC, has fought in the UFC for over 10 years. Like that is the shit that just, it really irks me to see that this is what can happen. And off of what? It's just, it's built off of and fabricated off of glaze from other people, but not really based in any facts that we can actually look at from a record standpoint. So I wanted to make a video just calling that out. I feel like when you look at, you know, Dricus and Khamzat and Lerone Murphy, like, and like, dude, the rest of these fighters getting paid, you know, assuming this is accurate, right? These payouts are fantastic. I'm so happy for all these fighters because this almost looks like assuming this is true, this is like, you could print this out and go shit on anyone who talks about UFC pay, right? Because the way I'm looking at it is, yeah, sure, Eric Nolan made 16K to get choked out, but and Alibi Idris made 16K. Sure, that is not ideal, right? But at the same time, I think Eric Nolan and Alibi Idris would also feel like they are paid pretty comfortably for that. Especially given, especially for Eric Nolan, it's a short notice fight. He did a great job in too. But outside of that, I mean, to see that you've got Bison Gore made 28,000, which is the typical 14-14 we would expect with a show and win on a standard UFC contract. Dione Barbosa 15-15, or I guess she makes just 30-30 because she didn't win. Joseph Morales must have made 30-30, or maybe it was 10 with a $50,000 bonus. Karini Silva 93K, so she's probably doing what's 93K divided by 2. I don't fucking know. 40, 45 and 45 is 90. So I don't know, guys. 46 and a half, I think. Well, whatever the case is, like, these are great payouts. When I look at Carlos Prates only making 131K according to this, that's crazy. I feel like he deserved to make more than that. And then, Chase Hooper, that doesn't seem accurate to me because he lost. And I don't think Chase Hooper's making 160 to show, 160 to win, but maybe he is. That would be surprising to me, though. But ultimately, like, everyone else on this list, I feel was paid fairly for their services, assuming it's accurate. But to see that drop off, like, to see like guys and gals who've been around the block a few times in the UFC making hundreds of thousands less than Aaron Pico is shocking to me. And honestly, as fans, I would think that, we would all be a bit shocked, assuming this is, if we had someone who could come out and say, yo, these are numbers are 1000% accurate. They probably aren't. But I think almost every UFC fan would be shocked to hear that, Pico's making 300K more than several fighters who have not even like 2 fights, not 5, not like 10 plus UFC fights under their belt. And like, he didn't even come in undefeated or anything. Like, he's got several losses on his record. I just, guys, I'm going to make another video about this, but basically it is just appalling to me to think that a guy debuting in the UFC, it almost makes me think like, man, what if like every fighter just did what he did, went to a lower promotion, had some success and then some non-success, and somehow just got this promotional push and then could make that type of money on their debut. Like, the amount of shit these other fighters have gone through to get to a point where they're making, even above 200K. It's just, to me is just it's very weird for the UFC to go that route. And I don't even know how that monetary value is applied, but ultimately, guys, I wanted to make a video on it because I saw it and I was shocked, and I can't even fathom that you would have a debuting fighter make that much money with really no proof of worth, right? Or value. And like, let's just tie this back to Artem, what's his name? I can't remember his last name. Artem Vakitov, who fought Pereira and beat Pereira in kickboxing, was offered, after winning a Contender Series, was offered 12,000 to show, 12,000 to win. And this is a guy who held a belt, I believe, in 1 or 2 different weight classes. I think it was only the light heavyweight belt, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not very in the know on Glory kickboxing and rankings and belts and things of that nature, but he did have a belt there. And he's beaten Alex Pereira. And he did the whole dog and pony show of I'll go on Contender Series, right? For the UFC to offer him 12,000 to show, 12,000 to win as his first UFC contract is, and then compare that to Aaron Pico, whose best win is like the Henry Corrales guy. and he's making that much money, that is disgusting to me. And there's something wrong. Like, I don't know who's making these decisions at the UFC, but that is just absolutely, like, there's no comparison between, like, Vakitov literally could be like, bro, I literally have beat your champion in kickboxing, and you're going to offer me $24,000 to fight in your organization. That is just, like, absolutely nuts to me. Now, even like Pereira himself was offered, a $50K to show, $50K to win, didn't have to go on a Contender Series. But that just goes to show you, like, there is no one size fits all. It is in a lot of ways, it's like this political game of, like, who you're rubbing elbows with. But to know that, and know that Vakitov had to turn down the UFC contract because he literally said, I can't even make, like, for 24 grand, I can't even, like, I would make no money because of, like, his camp expenses and things of that nature. That is just absolutely crazy to me. So yeah, this is the first of what could be many. I would love to hear from you guys. I do kind of like looking at this. I have also thought about making content like, what I think a UFC fighter should do with their earnings, right? And mainly because I feel like, from what I've heard from just different fighters and things of that nature, it's like, it doesn't seem like a lot of fighters have the right mindset, not mindset, but they don't have the right skills from, like, a financial perspective to operate the best ways they can. And, like, one thing I would say is, like, obviously because they're third-party contractors, I don't know what the contract says, but my guess is that each fighter could technically be set up as an LLC where they're receiving money from the UFC, like their payment for their efforts could be written to their LLC. And the reason I'm going off of this is I've looked in other things previously. For instance, during that whole lawsuit situation, Brock Lesnar, like, Death Clutch LLC or whatever, was his business, and, like, the UFC would pay him like $1.5 million, like 800,000. I think it's like 6 months before the fight, and then I think 800,000 a week before the fight, or some weird thing. But, like, they would write it or wire it to his business, and I think that that's one area, right? Like, where I would love to make a series on that, just because there's just certain things I know, right, about finances, just being a bit of a nerd myself, and that could help fighters. But I just think that, like, operating as a business is the best approach for these fighters, because then when they're getting these payouts, instead of just having taxes, like, pulled out of their fight earnings, I think that fighters should look at it from a business perspective, and every single thing they're doing on a daily basis, their manager, their coaching staff, their agent, if they have one. Generally, the manager plays the agent role, so, like, you're usually not paying two of them. But where I'm headed with that is all of those things become expenses then. So if a fighter, for instance, Karine Silva is making $93K for her fight, and let's just say she doesn't fight again this year, she's made $93K. Well, every single thing she paid for to get her prepared and ready for that fight this year would be tax deductible off of what she earned, right? So she could have that $93K on paper, but let's just say to pay for her food, her nutritional needs, her coaching staff, and even if she wanted to invested in, home equipment for, practicing, let's just say total, like, she made $93K, but let's just say all of those expenses, she spent $50K, right? She would only now be taxed on the $43,000, because you could basically take all of those deductions, the $50K, off the top of what she earned. And now, instead of Karine Silva, coming out of her check, paying for taxes at $93,000, now she can clearly show, like, here's all my expenses. She's now taxed at $43,000, not $93,000. So just shit like that I want to make content for. So ultimately, guys, this was kind of fun for me to break down, but I will say, like I've said multiple times in this video already, likely that this information is not accurate, but just for the sake of other companies and websites posting it. Let's just play the game. And I would love to hear how you guys feel about, someone debuting with pretty much no true MMA record or accolades making this amount of money. Like, I would love to know if you guys think that's appalling as well. So make sure you comment below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. And please subscribe to Fight Feed if you haven't already, so you can stay on top of all the new content that I'll be posting. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.